What's happening, guys? Welcome to part 6 in the series on building a full stack application using scikit-learn, Node.js and React. In this video, we're going to wrap it all up by building our front-end application with React and Carbon design system. Ready to get into it? Let's do it. All right, so we're now up to part 6 on building an end-to-end machine learning application using React.JS, Node, and scikit-learn. So in this video, we're going to be focusing on our client front end, and specifically we're going to be building it using React. So let's go on ahead and start to set up our React app. Now we can do that using the create React app command, and we're actually going to create all of our client and front end stuff inside of a folder called client. So let's go on ahead and do that. So I've just got our existing backend application inside of a folder called app. So in order to set up create React app, we're just going to run npx create React app and then client. So this is going to store all of our front end stuff inside of a folder called client. So let's go on ahead and run that. Perfect, so that's finished running, and now we can see that we've got a folder called client and we've got a whole bunch of good stuff in there. Now, before we start our client, what we're going to do is install our dependencies that we're going to need for our front end. So again, we can install those using the npm install command. So let's go on ahead and cd into that folder and install all the stuff that we're going to need. So first up, we just need to cd into our client folder, and then from there we can install all of our dependencies. Now we're going to be using the Carbon design system, so this just gives us a lot of really nice components that we can work with. So we've got accordions and modals and a whole bunch of other stuff. But one of the really cool things about Carbon design system is that you have a number of pre-built charts. These are all free and open source, so it basically allows you to give a nice look and feel and a bit of visualization to your existing front-end apps. So what we're going to do is install those dependencies. Now there's a great tutorial in here if you're just getting started or if you don't want to follow my video explicitly, and it just goes through installing Carbon. So we're really just going to be following through with this tutorial, but specifically we've got a few add-ons to help make our app work. So let's go on ahead and get our dependencies installed, and then I'll walk through each of those dependencies and comment a little bit on them. So let's go on ahead and do that. So we're inside of our client folder. Now we just need to install those dependencies. So to do that, I'm just going to run npm install, and then we're going to write out our dependencies. Perfect, so those are all of our dependencies. So you can see here that we've got Carbon charts React. So this is going to allow us to work with our charts from Carbon. We've got icons React, so these just gives us some really nice icons to work with. Axios lets us make requests from our front end. Carbon components React, and Carbon icons are again derivatives of the Carbon design system. D3 gives us some visualizations. .env allows us to work with a .env file, so we're going to need that for our Carbon design system setup. And Node Sass basically allows us to write a Sass CSS, so it basically gives us our formatting. So let's go on ahead and install those. Awesome, so that's now done. So we've now gone and installed all of our libraries. So if we take a look inside of our package.json file, we've got everything we need to get started. Now, what we should probably do is actually start up our app just to make sure everything still runs. Now, if you cast back your mind to the last video, what we did is we set up a number of scripts inside of our main server package.json file. And this allows us to run both our client and our dev at the same time. So what we can do is now step back into our server and run our dev script. So this will start up both our backend and our front end at the same time. So we can just make sure that everything's running successfully. So let's go on ahead and do that. Awesome, so you can see our React app is running successfully. So now what we're going to do is just start cleaning this up. So by default, whenever we run the create React app command, there's going to be a lot of bloatware that comes with it, or a bunch of stuff that you don't really need when you're getting set up. So we're going to start stripping all that out and start building up our own app. So specifically, if we go into our client folder, there's a bunch of stuff under source that we want to remove. So specifically, we want to remove app.css, so we can delete that. We want to remove app.test.js, we can strip that out. Index.css, logo.svg, serviceworker.js, and setuptest.js. So we can strip all of those out. Now you can see that our application is going to crash when we delete that, and that's because within our app.js file and our index.js file, it was actually referencing some of those other files that have been mentioned. So let's go on ahead into app.js and start stripping out the stuff that we don't need. So let's just minimize this. So because we deleted logo.svg, we're just going to remove that. We're also going to delete this line here, which is referencing that logo, because we don't have that anymore. And then what we can do is step into our index.js file, and we're going to strip out our index.css, our service worker, because we've deleted that as well. And we can delete all this down here. And hopefully if we save, we've still got app.css mentioned somewhere. We can remove that as well. Perfect. So you can see our service is still running successfully. So if we go back now, we can go and make a quick change to our app, just so we can read it out. And we need to delete that A tag as well. Perfect. So you can see our React app is still running successfully, so there's no problems there. Now what we're going to do is just set up Carbon Design System so we can start using those components. So in order to do that, we need to set up a couple of SCSS files as well as our env variable. Now the steps for doing this are actually on the Carbon Design System layout. So if you want to follow that, it's all basically under here under Install Carbon. We're basically going to be following those steps now to just get Carbon Design System set up and within our React application. So let's go on ahead and do that. So we've done a couple of things there. So we've set up a app.scss file, and that doesn't actually have anything in it, but we need it in order to compile our SCSS. We've also created an index.scss file, and we've just run this import command, which comes from the Carbon Design System setup. And we've also set up a .env file. So Carbon Design System needs us to specify our Sass path. In this case, we're just grabbing it from our node modules folder. So that should all be fine. So now if we go over to our React app and refresh, so while it's compiling our SCSS, as soon as that finishes compiling, you should see the format of our text change because it's now using the text from our Carbon Design System. So let's give that a sec to compile, and then we should be good to go. Perfect. So you can see that the format of our text has now changed. It's a little bit small to see, but you can see it's definitely picked up a different format. So that's good. Now what we can start doing is actually building our app. So the first thing that we're going to do is create a file called utils.js, and this is going to contain all the fields that we need for our machine learning application. So really when we set up our machine learning application, we had years, months, cost centers, and accounts. Now, what we want to do is have a number of different selects so we can pick the different years, months, cost centers, and accounts. So in this case, we're just going to paste on over, I've pre-written it up, just a number of fields that contain our different utilities. Perfect, so we've got that. Now, all we're really looking at here is just different sets of arrays. So in this case, we've got an array for our years, so 2019, 2020, 2021. Likewise, we've got one for our months, for our cost centers, and for our accounts. So having it in a separate utilities.js file basically means that it's going to be easier for us to make changes to our application later on when we want to add additional years, months, cost centers, and accounts. So let's save that. All right, and we're going to be working largely inside of our app.js file. So right now we don't have too much in it apart from hello world. So if we actually change this, we can change it to hello Nick, and you can see that that's going to re-render. All of our work is going to be largely based in here, but for our visualizations. So the first thing that we want to do is bring in some of our Carbon components so that we can start building our forms and our form groups. So let's go on ahead and do that. Perfect, so we've brought in a bunch of stuff there. So we've brought in our form, so that sort of wraps up all of our form group components. We've got our form group, so in this case, we're going to have our select and our select items inside of a form group. We've also brought in button and loading. So button is really just going to be a button, and loading is going to give us a nice loading screen whilst we're running our predictions. So now what we want to start doing is setting up our form. So in this case, our form is going to have 4 different selects, which basically allow us to pick our year, our month, our cost centers, and our accounts. So let's go on ahead and do that. Perfect. So we've now got our first dropdown set up. So what we did there was we set up a number of things. So specifically, we set up our form, or started setting up our form. And within our form, we've got a single form group at the moment, which contains our select and our select items. So within our select, what we're actually doing is we're looping through all the years that we've got available within our utils.js file. And if you take a look just up here, I added this line here, which brings in our years, our months, our cost centers, and our accounts. So basically what we're doing is we're looping through each one of the years within our utils.js file, and we're displaying those as items within our dropdown. So you can see them here. Now what we can do if we wanted to is if we went to our utils.js file and added an additional year, so say we added, what's a great one, 2022. Now what we should be able to see is that we've now got an additional year within our dropdown. So that's going to allow us to dynamically adjust what our selector fields look like. So in this case, we've only got one, so let's remove that additional year. So in this case, we've only got one dropdown showing up at the moment, but what we can do is add in the additional dropdowns that we need. So if we just copy that and paste it 3 times and make updates for our months, cost centers, and accounts, we should be able to have the majority of our form group set up. So let's go on ahead and do that. Perfect, so that's looking good. So if we scroll back on over, you can see that we've got a drop down for our year and for our months. Those are looking good. And for our, oh, we need to change our labels. So you can see that these are still showing up as select here. So let's change those. So select cost center and select account. Perfect, that's looking better. So we've got select year, select month, select cost center, and select account. So if we take a look at our different form groups, so you can see that we've now got 4 different form groups. And let's collapse this one. So our first form group is covering off our year. Our second form group, which is here, is covering off our month. Let's collapse that again. Our third form group is covering off our cost center, and our last form group is covering off our accounts. So all up, we've now handled those drop downs. Now the last thing that we need to add to our form group is a button. So let's add that. Perfect, cool. So we've got our button now. It's not actually doing anything. The last thing that we should probably do is align this to center. So right now it's shifted up into the top left-hand corner of our screen. So we can move that and center that back into the center, just using our SCSS and updating specifically our index.scss file. So we've already got a class name allocated to, jump back into our app.js file. We've already got a class name allocated to our form. So in this case, what we need to do is just align our main container and our form by updating it in our index.scss file. So let's go on ahead and do that. Perfect, cool. So we've written that SCSS. So this is just compiling. So ideally, once that's finished compiling, you should see our app shift and center. So let's let that compile, and then we should see that move into the center of our screen. All right, that looks like it's done. And you can see that our form is now centered. So it's looking a lot better. Again, we can sort of still click through. That's fine. All right, so right now we're handling our different dropdowns, but we're not actually doing anything with the data. So ideally what we want to be able to do is update our application state every time we update one of those dropdowns. Now we can do this relatively easy using React hooks, and specifically we're going to be using the useState lifecycle function to help us handle these. So let's go on ahead and start setting that up. So in this case, we're going to first up import our dependencies. So we're going to import useState. And then within our function app section, what we're going to do is start setting up our state variables. So in this case, we're going to have one for our year, for our month, for our cost center, and for our account. So let's go on ahead and do that. Awesome. So that's all done now. Now what we want to do is actually make sure that every time we change one of the dropdowns within our dropdown list, we actually go back and update this state here. So let's go on ahead and change those. So we just need to make an update to our selects so that every time there's a change to each one of those selects, we're actually updating our state as well. So let's do that. So in order to do that, we just want to use the onChange function. And we want to call our set year or set month or set cost center accounts. Oh, actually, we need to change those. Cool. All right, let's go and update these. So again, within our onChange function, we're just going to call those functions. Oh, let's close that. Perfect. Cool. So that's all done now. So ideally, whenever we're changing each one of those dropdowns, we're now going to have our state variables updated as well. Now, in order to see that reflected, what we can do is set up a button or set up a function attached to our button that actually goes and console logs that out. So let's go on ahead and set that up. So in this case, we're just going to have a function called run prediction, which eventually we're going to tie to our backend, but initially we're just going to log out each one of those state variables. So let's set that up. Perfect, so that's looking good. So let's go and test that out. So if we open up our console and make that a little bit bigger. So ideally what should happen is if we go and change all of these, when we go and hit predict, we're actually console logging them out. And you can see we're outputting 2020. That's because we haven't changed our state. So let's go and do that again. Try that. So again, we're grabbing 2019, we're grabbing October, we're grabbing cost center 301 and that specific account. So that's looking good. What we should also do is just make sure we change our default value for year to 2019 because that's the first one in our list. So that should be a little bit better now. So now if we go and hit predict, it's logging out exactly what we've got in our initial state. Once we change it, for example, if we go to 2020, we're now updating that as well. Cool, so that's working well. Now what we want to do is actually go and run a prediction. So right now we're just logging out the information that we've got displayed on our screen. But what we actually want to do is go to our backend and actually run that prediction that we actually set up in our backend. Now, before we actually go and do that, we want to go and set up a proxy. So this is going to allow our front-end application to go to our backend server. So we can do that pretty easily. All we need to do is type in proxy within our package.json file and set that to HTTP localhost 5000 because that's where our backend is running. So this is going to mean that whenever we send a scoring request, we're basically going to go to our backend API to actually run that. All right, so that's all done. So we can step back into our app, and then from here, we're actually going to run our prediction. So the first thing that we want to do is make sure that we've got Axios imported. So at the moment, we don't. So let's bring that in. Cool, so that's Axios imported. Now what we want to do is capture our data and send it to our backend API. So let's go on ahead and set that up. So what we've basically written is we're going to send an Axios post request to /API/WML/score. And because we've got our proxy set up, it's actually going to be going to HTTP, or it should be HTTP /localhost 5000 /API/WML/score. Cool. So now, and we're also logging out that information as well. So we should be able to see the scoring request come through in our console, and we should be able to see that result. So let's go on ahead and test that out. So if we make a few changes, for example, 2020, March, and that cost center, that. Now, if we run predict, doesn't look like it's picked up our proxy, so let's just restart our server. Awesome, so that's now up and running. Let's test that out again. Perfect, and you can see that we've gone and triggered that off. We're not seeing anything on the screen, but if we check our console, you can see that within our data section of our response, we've actually gone and got a prediction. So based on the fields that we've actually gone and passed through, so year 2019, January, cost center 100 and account 1 million, we're getting back a predicted sales of 1,347. Perfect, so we've actually now gone and sent through a scoring request all the way through to our backend. Now what we want to do is actually display that to the screen. So at the moment, we're not actually showing anything, but we want to make it look a little bit better. So what we're going to do is set up a prediction or scoring results box so we can actually display that on our screen. And then eventually we're going to have a bit of a chart which allows us to see our historical scoring requests. So let's go on ahead and start by setting up our prediction results so we can at least see our value on the screen. So similar to how we had different state variables for our year, month, cost center, and our account, we're going to set up two additional ones, one for our score, so this is going to hold our historical scoring results, and one for our prediction. So that's going to maintain our prediction at a point in time. So let's set those up. Perfect, so we've gone and set that up. So we've just gone and added these two lines here. So these two, and this is basically going to give us a prediction state variable and a scores state variable. So our prediction is just going to be a value, our scores is going to be an array of values. Now what we can do is whenever we send a prediction and get a result back, we're going to store our prediction or our response inside of our prediction variable, and we're also going to append it to our scores array. So this is going to allow us to have a number of values stored in our array. So let's go ahead and update our run prediction function so that we actually store those values. Perfect, so that's looking good. So we're now setting so initially we set our prediction value or our state value to scoring. So this is just going to be a placeholder. And then what we actually do once we get our response back, we're also going to be storing that response inside of our scoring state variable or inside of our prediction state variable. And so basically what we're doing is from our response, we're just going traversing through our result and we're grabbing out that value. We're also taking that same result and we're appending it to our scores array. So if we console log that out now, we should be able to see those. So let's go on ahead and test that out. So if we change these and run a prediction, you can see that we've now got our prediction and we've also got an array of our historical predictions. So if we do another one, again, you can see that we're now appending to our array. So we've now got our current prediction plus our historical predictions. So our historical predictions are going to be used to visualize our historical results once we bring in our visualization. So let's go on ahead and bring in our initial score, and then we'll also set up a quick visualization as well using Carbon Design System chart. So let's go on ahead and do that. So we're just going to set up a new div called prediction container, and this is going to store our predictions. Now what we're going to do is just pass through and make sure that we've actually got a valid prediction. So we're going to make sure we display text if we've got a valid prediction and then display the value itself. Perfect, so let's quickly take a look at what we've got there. So we've gone and set up an initial ternary operator. So we're basically checking if we've got a prediction. If we do, then we're going to output the model predicted. And again, if we've got a prediction, we're also going to check if whether or not it's scoring or a valid prediction. If we do, then we're going to display that prediction. If not, and we're scoring in the real time, then we're actually going to be showing our loading box. So let's go on ahead and test that out. Perfect, cool. So that's all working. So you can see that down here, we've got the model predicted 1,347. And if we change this, again, you can see that our model predicted 979. So already we're actually returning valid results. Now, the last thing that we want to do is reformat this to make it look a little bit better and add our bar chart. So let's go on ahead and start setting that up. So first up, let's make sure we have some proper formatting for this value here. So we can do that by going into index.scss and just making sure we update that. So in this case, we want to update our prediction result and our prediction container. Perfect, now we just need to let that compile. Awesome, so that looks good. So you can see that we've now got way better formatting. So we've got the model predicted 979. And again, if we change our fields, we should be able to get some nice results, nice looking results as well. Awesome, so that's looking great. Now the last thing that we want to do is set up our chart. So in this case, we're just going to have a bar chart displaying here with our historical results. So in order to do that, we're just going to set up a separate component and bring that into our main app.js file. So let's go on ahead and start doing that. So inside of our source folder, we're going to create a new folder called components. And within that, we're going to create another folder called data.viz. And within that, we're going to create a file and we're going to call that bar chart. Perfect. Now within our bar chart.js file, we're going to use the quick shortcut within VS Code to set up a functional component. Awesome, so that's set us up. Now what we want to do is import our dependencies. So let's go on ahead and do that. Perfect, so that's all good. Now what we want to do is actually fill out a bar chart. So in this case, all we need to do is set up two components. So our options that our bar chart's going to pass through and the actual bar chart. So I'm going to quickly set that up and then we're going to bring it into our app.js file and use it. Perfect, so those are our options set up. So these are the options that you need to set up whenever you're working with visualizations from Carbon Design System. So in this case, we've just set up our left axes, our bottom axes, whether or not it's resizable, the height and the width, and then all we need to do is actually return our bar chart. So let's go on ahead and wrap up that final component. Perfect, so that's our bar chart set up. Now all we need to do is bring it into our app.js file and render it to our screen. So perfect, so we're bringing that in. So what we're basically doing is going into our components folder, our data.viz folder, and our bar chart file and bringing in our bar chart. Now what we need to do is just render it. So in this case, we're going to render it beneath our predictions and we're going to be passing through our historical scores to it. So let's go on ahead and do that. Perfect, so that's looking all good. Now the last thing that we want to do is actually apply some Scss formatting to our chart container. So let's go on ahead and add that before we compile. And let it compile. Awesome, so that's done. So now ideally, if we run a prediction, when we hit predict, we should get our prediction value as well as our chart. And there you go. So we're now starting to see our prediction results. There you go. We've now wrapped up the final part in the series. So we just went and added our simple bar chart. We're also displaying our prediction. And if we check into our values, oh, we're not console logging it out, but you can see that we've got our values there. That about wraps this up. So overall, what we did is we created our React app. We rendered our predictions once we'd scored against our backend API, and then we used Carbon Design System to showcase our values into a chart at the end. Thanks so much for tuning in. Thanks so much for tuning in, guys. Hopefully you found this video useful. If you did, be sure to give it a thumbs up and hit subscribe and tick that bell so you get notified of when I'm releasing new videos. If you get stuck at any point at all, be sure to drop a mention in the comments below and let me know how you go. Thanks again for tuning in. Peace.